I realize I haven't put up a lot of videos as of late. And I'm trying really hard to cut back on social media involvement, because there's a lot of things I still want to do in this life in the time that I have left, and I'm still healthy enough to do them. And of course, the thing with Trump getting another term, that just scares the living shit out of me. And the big thing, of course, the last couple of weeks has been his giant fuck you to the U.S. Senate by continuing to nominate people who are just beyond the pale, unqualified. We had Matt Gaetz, and even he was too much to handle, and he finally withdrew, and then some woman was nominated in his place, and she's almost as wacko as he is, but she's not very well known. And then we have the likes of Tulsi Gabbard, who's been long rumored to be a tool of the Russians, and she's been nominated to a post for which she has no business being. We have that weirdo Fox person who has been nominated as the Secretary of Defense, and he's been accused of rape in the past, and also that he has said that women should not have combat roles. You know, they're delicate little flowers that need to be homemakers and breeders and all that other shit. Anyway, that's my words. And then, even gianter fuck you was his having that Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk give advice about government waste and all that shit. Of course, Musk especially has gotten rich off of government contracts. He's a goddamn crook. All of them are. All of them are. And then you have that woman, and McMahon or whatever the hell her name is, that was nominated for Secretary of Education, the Department of Education, and she's unqualified as hell. She is like involved with professional wrestling, and she also had some accusations leveled at her. And then, of course, there's RFK Jr., and remember I talked about him a while back, and Dr. Oz being nominated. And these could all be stalking horses for, like Matt Gaetz maybe was, in order to create all this diversion, while the real culprits will go in unnoticed. But it needs to be watched, because this is gangsterism in action. And then people are going to have buyer's remorse. Maybe they will. I don't know. I don't hold my breath. And they're still wringing their hands. Oh, we've got to appeal to the working class. Bullshit. It's these guys, and it's mostly guys, and you can't fix them. They have to find out the hard way. They've got to have their faces slapped repeatedly. Maybe the sense gets knocked into them, but it's hard to root out the racism and the sexism of their attitude about that, and their fear of losing their privilege. They think they earned it, but it's a privilege. They just point and they get whatever the hell they want. And now that it's a little bit less of a rigged game in their favor, they throw a fit about it. Well, hell with them. But I've said all that before. But, as I get older and I look back on things, I start looking back on things, and I've been doing that, and almost everybody does that. And so I was looking at the old rock concerts, like Woodstock. They had a documentary made of it. And then, of course, Gimme Shelter. That was about the infamous Altamont concert that was a disaster in California. And I got both of those recently. I had seen Gimme Shelter years ago, off and on. But I have the DVD now, because usually when I would be interested in purchasing it. It was too damned expensive, but finally it came down enough in price that I could get my own copy. And Woodstock, I finally got around to getting that. And boy, you can see the contrast. And of course, I already had known about Gimme Shelter, had watched it, and knew about it. And then, this weekend I just watched the Woodstock documentary for the first time. And they were talking about the people there were talking about, oh, these people were sick, and oh, we need medical help, and oh, this is just so bad. And I thought, why don't you ask Grace Slick about it? How bad it was, how bad they had it there compared to where she went later on. 4 months later, she was at Altamont, and the lead singer, or one of the members there, Marty Ballin, damn near got killed when he confronted the Hells Angels there at Altamont. And there was all these beatings with Q-sticks. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you really had it bad there in Woodstock. I mean, it was bad. They got rained like anything. There was rain, and of course there were 450,000 people there in that cow pasture. That's now, of course, it's an arts venue at that site. And they talk, and there were, I think, a couple of deaths and a few births there, but it wasn't the hellhole that it was at Altamont. It was just a mud hole, not a hellhole. And the best part of Woodstock, and of course not all the acts gave permission to have their performances included. That was Creedence Clearwater was the most notable. But that wasn't the most fun part. The most fun part was the parts where they talked about the neighbors of the farmer, and Yasker, I think was his name, who died just a few years after the concert. But they were just pissed off at the mess that these kids were making. Oh God, they just had a fit. They just absolutely had a fit, and it was hilarious to watch that part of it. But the kids, they interview they were kids then. Now, if they're alive at all, they would be like in their 70s and 80s. But back then, and they were talking about, and they were stoned, and they would talk about something, and it didn't make sense. And I thought, Jesus, And then the filmmakers had too many butt shots, naked butts, and things like that. And that just, I didn't care about it. I would have just preferred more of the music and a lot less of the inane comments. But, the things that are remembered most about that concert today were the opening performance by Richie Havens. And he deserved a lot of praise for his performance. And the interesting thing about him is after he passed away, I think about 2013, he was cremated and his ashes were scattered there at the Woodstock site. So I thought that was kind of a neat aside. And then the closing act was Jimi Hendrix, and everybody remembers that performance. But the funny thing is, very few of the attendees saw him perform that at the concert, because by the time he got on, thanks to all the rain and the delays, it was Monday morning, and most of the people cut out. 90% of them went back home, went back to work, went back to school. So he was playing to 40,000 people at most in a sea of garbage, literally a sea of garbage. So it was kind of hilarious to see that. But that performance is so well known that he did. And that's the two things that are most remembered about that concert. And then, of course, Altamont was the total antithesis, and pretty much that was the end, and it was bad. And those filmmakers, and they got a lot of criticism over including that killing, but how the hell could you even make a movie about Altamont and not include that? Which wasn't really about Altamont to begin with. It was about the Rolling Stones' tour of 1969 across America. That's really what it was about. And Altamont was kind of a last minute deal, which was a mistake. You never plan something that big on the fly shortly before it takes place. I mean, what could happen? What possibly could happen? And then naively have the Hells Angels there as security. And they were, you know, a lot of them were drunk, a lot of them were substance abusers, and they were beating the shit out of people just for the hell of it. Or if they touched their motorcycles. Oh my God. But that, if you're going to see one of the movies, you got to see the other. Because there's the contrast. And I was reading, and I have been reading Joel Selvin's book about Altamont. And that's really good. But my point in all of this is kind of a roundabout way. But when you see things like this 50 years later, and I wished I'd have seen Woodstock when it first came out, or shortly after, and not 50 years, almost 55 years later. Because when you're this age, and you watch things that happened years ago, at least with me, the thing I wanted to do was see how many of these people were still alive. That's what I did. Every one of these acts, if I didn't know they were still alive or dead, I went out and looked them up to see if they were still alive or they were dead. And if they're still alive, they're pushing 80 or in their 80s. Grace Slick is 85 years old. I can't believe it. And most, like Roger Daltrey of The Who, he's 80. Stephen Stills is almost 80. And well, look at Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, 81 years old. Well, Keith Richards will be 81 in a few days, matter of days. And Bill Wyman's 88 years old. And you think, oh my God, where did the years go? But that's what I did, is I would look, the ones I didn't know, I looked up, or weren't quite sure, I looked up. So like one of the acts that was at Woodstock, Canned Heat, that's an example. And of those members, only the drummer is still alive. And two of those people died young. Bob Haidt was one of them. And Alan Wilson, known for his vocal of Going Up the Country, which was a reworking of Henry Thomas's Bulldoze Blues. Except Henry Thomas had panpipes and not flutes. But he died in 1970. Alan Wilson did. And Bob Haidt, I think, died in 81. But Wilson, and I didn't know this, when he had passed away, apparently of an accidental drug overdose. Some claimed suicide, but it wasn't proven. But his ashes were scattered up at Sequoia National Park. So I was up there this summer, and maybe somewhere where I was among those sequoias was the spirit of Alan Wilson there, because he loved the outdoors. That was his thing in life. He loved that more than music. But anyway, all that aside, you realize when you're old, when you get old, you're looking at this stuff. You know, how many of these people are still alive? And then you look at the audience of both of these shows and the others of that time, and how many of those people are still alive and how many of them are dead. And it's just, you know, it really does. You realize how short life is. You realize how fast time goes. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So there was that. And, you know, and I've just been mostly reading about stuff and focusing on work, focusing on trying to get an exit plan for when I finally have to retire from full-time work. I can't keep doing what I'm doing. And I want to try to do something else. So the main things I've been interested in is trying to find places to go to. And not let the shit going on in D.C. get me down. Because that, you get depressed and then you don't want to do anything. But anyway, I was also reading about old Peter Bergna, and I don't know if I ever talked about him. I probably did. He was the one that killed his wife by staging an accident on the Mount Rose Highway. And yeah, right there, well, it was right in here where it happened, because there was still a slope there, so he could get out if needed. But you go over here, and it's a straight drop, and that's a blind turn right there. I drove on that road, and it scared the shit out of me. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. Driving the other way, going uphill didn't bother me as much. But coming down, holy crap. And you can't see anybody coming around that turn. But anyway, it happened right there. And through here. And anyway, he staged it, and he had 2 trials. In the first trial, it was a hung jury. The second trial, because the prosecution had a lot more forensics, I think, and they knew what the defense was going to pull, they were able to get a conviction out of him. And he's still rotting away in prison. He's at the same prison where O.J. was for several years. O.J. Simpson. So over there at Lovelock. And he's been denied parole, Bergna, repeatedly, and then he finally, well, not finally, but he'll be up for parole again, I think next year or the year after. But this was a good article about it. And it was one of the most notable in Nevada. But he thought he could get away with it. He thought he could just dump his wife, knock her off, get her inheritance, which he did. He got the insurance. He managed to con her brothers out of her share of the farm in California. They just bought him off because they couldn't stand him. They knew he killed her. So he had like $700 and some thousand, which he blew in a lot of it. And I'm sure the lawyers got the rest of it. But he didn't, I mean, he wasn't innocent. What the hell was with the gas cans with no caps on them? You know, all that stuff. All the little things. And that's circumstantial. Okay, that's not eyewitness. I mean, that's kind of circumstantial. Because, you know, well, there's this, there's this, there's this. And nobody saw him do it. Which I'm amazed nobody saw him do it. He got lucky there on a summer night. But what he did, he didn't have, or they didn't have the they didn't have the evidence like they would have had, or all the DNA wouldn't have done him any good. But it was all the little things they put together, all the little pieces of the puzzle that nailed his butt, plus his damn shoe with the asphalt on it. So anyway, he's rotting away in prison, and then there's a couple of there was one case of somebody on the internet, and I won't say who, somebody on YouTube, and it really doesn't matter the individual, but she was talking about, and it got a lot of hits, her video about her kids and their dad, and you know, she didn't know, and she found out marrying the guy for the money, and she had a video channel, about basically how to be a gold digger. That all backfired for her, apparently. And then his niece got on there and said, no, this was all lies, and it was all made up, and blah, blah, blah. But you know, that's not the issue. To me, none of that is the issue. The issue is, why do you need to share personal matters like that on the internet, get your face in front of the camera. And why do that when it should be handled by the courts? Why do you need to get up in front of a camera in front of millions of potentially audience of billions of strangers and try to tell them your tale of woe? That's TMI. That's way too much information that should not be shared with the public. And that is mostly what everybody missed. Oh no, her story's true. No, that his niece's story is true. No, that none of that is the issue. The issue is sharing that damn information online. It does not belong online. And that's another thing that I think about, is why the hell people feel the need to put their face in front of a camera when you're not a public figure and you make yourself a public figure. Why do you do it? If you have a topic to talk about, you don't need to have your face in front of a camera. And then you have the public criticizing how you look. It all becomes how you look and how you present yourself. And it isn't about the issue being discussed. Why do you need to do this? Are you that narcissistic that you need to have your face in front of the camera? I mean, all I would want to hear is information. I don't want to see your damn face. I don't care. But the thing is, there are people out there that are damn weird, and they're going to dox you, and they're going to hunt you down. And there's a woman, one of the YouTubers, and I won't say who, and she doesn't have near as many as that other, well, I don't say near as many. She probably has about as many as that one I just mentioned. But she gets on, her face is on everything. Her face is on the thumbnails. Her face is everywhere. On all of the thumbnails is her damn face. And she's always talking about different stuff. And the thing that really gets me is when she trash talks her ex-husband, about her ex-husband. And she talks about things that should never be divulged over the internet. They should be private. And he would be, her ex would be justified in having her channel taken down. Because there's a limit to it. You know, that's invading their privacy. He might be everything she says he is. And that could all be true. But the thing is, you don't share that stuff. You don't air dirty laundry for hits. But anyway, yeah, I'm kind of in a rambling mood, as usual, because I don't do a script and I never will. So anyway, that's been my thoughts for this week, and I'm glad that the Thanksgiving holiday is finally showing up. So anyway, and I'm feeling a whole lot better, so we'll see how long that lasts. Anyway, that is all for today.